deal with trauma, little trauma, big trauma, generational trauma, cultural trauma, family trauma, all the time. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're carrying it around. It could be a level of irritability that we feel, or a constant anxiety, or
Mm.
some kind of vibration in our body that always makes us feel like uncomfortable, or it makes us feel unhappy or sad or depressed. And we just, and sometimes we've been carrying it for so long that we don't recognize that it's actually not something that belongs to us. It's
Mm.
something that we have internalized from other sources around us, right? And I think that that is such an element to to not even getting to processing, but just like you said, understanding ourselves, being self-aware, and honoring ourselves, right? It's giving ourselves that space to be able to really just explore. And I think that for some people there's fear around that,
Mm.
that you do know the thing, that there's something that you're carrying that doesn't belong to you, or something that makes you feel unhappy or uncomfortable or anxious, but you're too fearful to explore it because you don't know what you're going to find there. And so when you talked about, Gwenda, when you talked about reaching out to your friends and talking to them, that is so important. Just having a safe space with people, creating a little pod of people that you can always go and talk to when you've got something that you want to figure out and work out for yourself, that you're able to actually start to say things like, I don't know, I feel like I've been carrying this weight with me for a long time. Or you want to say, I just feel like sometimes I'll be doing something and I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden I'll feel very overwhelmed. Right.
Mm.
And the trauma also comes in relationships where things are unresolved, or where things are contentious and they're constantly contentious. There is a traumatizing, and then there's a re-traumatizing, and there's continuous trauma. And because we are in relationships sometimes where we feel obligated to be with another person, we feel obligated to,
Mm.
for because they've been there with us in the past, or we have a long-standing relationship with them, or because we love them.
Mm-hmm.
We genuinely love those people, but we don't recognize that the interactions that we have with them are traumatizing for us, and most likely they're traumatizing for the other person as well. So this is really about, at the very, very base of it, is to just take that time to reflect, to be able to reflect on, how do I feel in this moment? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And just allow yourself to acknowledge it, even if you're not going to do anything about it right away. It's like Gwenda said, like, once the self-awareness starts, you start to recognize what are the things that are happening in your body that are giving you cues that there's something wrong, there's something you need to deal with. Even before that, it's just giving yourself permission, because also we're very busy.
Yep.
We're busy. This is COVID time. People are already feeling overwhelmed and stressed out. So it's just about making a little bit of space for yourself to just explore. Like Gwenda said, journaling is a great thing. Meditating is a good thing. Just even the act of taking a couple of minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, and just being still and breathing deeply.
Yes.
Just something like that, that allows you to stop stuffing everything down, start letting some of that stuff come up, because that's the only way it's going to clear out, is if you start letting it come up, and then you can start the processing. And like Gwenda was talking about, and what you're modeling so courageously, Gwenda, to everyone in doing your speech and talking about this today, is giving yourself that self-loving time,
Mm.
and treating yourself as a priority, and not putting everybody else and everything else first, taking that
Mm.
time and saying, you know what, there's something I need to do for myself. And just take that 15, 20 minutes to just be with you and let yourself start feeling, right?
Beautiful. Oh my God. And of course, and this is why I love our conversations. Like, because that's the whole thing, is like, is the being able to feed back and forth. So just to talk a little bit, like, there's two issues that you just talked about that was key. And just to let you guys know, again, we're going to touch on, like, every single week now for the month of October. We're looking at setting up a schedule, which we'll do little marketing things about. But one of these is going to be how to support other people, like how to create a safe space. But, and that's where that obligation piece that you talked about. I mean, this is the thing. We can have people that have been in our lives for, you know, most of our life, but they don't know how to support you. Even if you're telling them, this is what I need from you, a lot of times they can't hear it because of their trauma or their processing, or, you know, I have somebody in my life who I love dearly. And actually I joke about my little earth babies who would rather do anything but sit in their bodies and feel, because that's not their strong suit. Their strong suit is the person who gets things done, the people that, you know, take action and give us all that support. So, and so one of the phrases is that I put on the hip waders and I go right through the muck. If I know that there's muck, I'm going through it, mostly because in my experience, I've had a lot of muck, and it's like, okay, well, if I run from this, it's not going to do anything. And so the joke is to this person was that it was like, she'd rather put on stilettos, her high heel stilettos, and walk around it. And it's like, yeah, but that muck is still there. So, and so that sense of obligation, either to be this toxic positivity, like, you know, and again, I brought up the PMS stuff because this has got nothing to do with trauma. It has to do with, I mean, I had endometriosis, which wasn't even looked at when I was, you know, that age. I was just told it would get worse as I got older. But the mental, and then of course, as I just talked about, my dad was diagnosed manic depressive, which is now called bipolar. And I can remember talking to my mom and going, am I bipolar? You know, could I be manic depressive because I get weird? And it's like, yeah, I don't think manic depression comes every 28 days. And so it's the importance of being able to look at that and go, you know what? They're two separate issues, but having that actually helped me come to terms with even my dad, right? And what bipolar is and what it isn't, you know, because that's the thing. It doesn't come in set cycles. It comes when, you know, based on, it is hormonal. There is aspects that are similar, but PMS, it would be like almost every 3 or 4 months, I would have this really bad cycle. And when I got to the point where where I had a few people, one of them being my boss, where this one day, oh my God, it was horrible. And all I did was call him and say, I've lost it. And he goes, fine. And he hung up. And I didn't have to explain, but the whole fact is I had to start by saying, okay, this isn't good. I can't suck this up. You know, I need to, you know, like, oh my God, the first time, anyways, I cried for like 8 hours straight. I called the doctor and they're like, oh, you know, and then I find out, well, you should watch your blood sugar. So there's a difference between understanding when your body's off and understanding when it's a trigger. So a lot of people use the word trigger, and maybe we'll get into that, but that obligation is part of that trigger sometimes, right? Where we feel that we have to do this. And it's like, you don't have to do anything. And if you're not in a good space, now on the other side, it's not like there's an excuse, like, and actually, even if you want to use this as an excuse, that's up to you to decide. That's up to you with your honesty, your relationship with yourself. This also goes into that overwhelming feeling when you feel overwhelmed. Anybody watching this, mention in the comments, do you know when you feel overwhelmed? Do you know what those triggers are? Like, do you know what those cues are? Do you know if, you know, one of the things too, I had to call, you know, I took 2 days of antidepressants and I had to call an ambulance for myself. And the guy walked in and I said, my heart's like 100 beats per minute. Cause I know what it feels like when my heart's beating. I know what it feels like when I'm running at 170 beats per minute. And the guy looked at me like somehow I was weird, because he goes, oh yeah, it's 99 beats per minute. How did you know that? Well, cause I'm an athlete. I know what my body does. That's like saying, how do you know when your car's running well? So, you know, the thing in this society that we have where everything's supposed to be fixed in a second if you don't know that there's a problem, and how many people don't even know what happens in their body when they're overwhelmed because they just reach for that food. For me, it's food or, lying in bed with video games. Like, there's one thing saying, okay, this is the space I'm in today. There's another thing setting up shop there. So, so that would be the big thing is really giving yourself a break when it comes to the obligation, but more importantly, knowing what overwhelm feels like to you. And if there is people in your life that, sometimes I would say to people, like, this is how you can support me. And if they can't support you, then try not to be around those people. It's not because they don't love you. It's not. And you've got to really, this is where the whole thing of leaving people's responsibility for themselves at their feet, right? It's like, I can't be the person you want me to be right now. I need you to support me here. But so these are really about conversations. These are about setting boundaries. There's quite a few things that we can unpack here, but it just at this point, it's really, do you have those people in your life where you feel this sense of obligation? If you do, what's your backup plan for when things aren't going well, right? And then more importantly, what does it feel like when you're overwhelmed? What does it feel like in your body? What are the thoughts that go through your head? Because that's when you get into the, different kinds of thoughts, usually self-destructive, not nice thoughts, so that's where you almost got to ask yourself, would I say this to my best friend? Would I say this to somebody I love that I love? Would I say this to my children or my spouse? And keep that as a bar. What do you think, Aisha?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff that you've mentioned there. And I think that, the piece about obligation and overwhelm is really important, because the obligation piece, I mean, sometimes you can't cut people out of your life. Sometimes you have to have engagements with them. And what's really important, like you said, Glenda, is just to have an understanding of what kind of engagement you can have that you can still feel safe in, that still is supportive for you, and where you need to, like you said, set down the boundaries and be able to, just step back and say, look, I'm not able to do this for you at this time or at all, right?
Yeah.
This is not, it's not something that I can take responsibility for you. And knowing that overwhelm, I completely hear what you're saying. Like, I'm also someone who has fallen back on food for most of my life to deal with trauma that I've been through. And it is very painful when you can't figure out how to deal with what you're going through in a way that doesn't continue to destroy you, right?
Mhm.
And that is a painful thing. But it's little steps. Like, for me, the one thing I did, and I'm on today, is day 288 for me of intermittent fasting.
Mm.
And that has just been, thank you. That's been and the only reason I did it, and this is not something that I did to lose weight, this is something where I said to myself, I need to figure out a way to have a different relationship with food.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship with food cannot be about giving me comfort. Now, I started that, and it forced me to start dealing with feelings that I really pushed down in myself. And I was one of those people that didn't allow myself to feel what I needed to feel to start healing, right? And so, that was just something small that I did for myself that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And when you're ready to process, then you do find ways to be able to do things that are organically good for you and that authentically allow you to move through stuff that you really want to move through and that you need to move through, right? So that is also I've started to recognize now, where do I feel overwhelmed? How do I feel when I'm overwhelmed? And it's not nice. I mean, I'm one of those people that I get very frustrated, and I start berating myself when I'm in that place, and then I have to think, oh, why am I talking to myself like that? Because normally I don't talk to myself like that, right? So it's just recognizing, and also my journey with intermittent fasting was very much about allowing myself to feel what I needed to feel, and choosing a different way to deal. And that was a choice that it's taken me over 40 years to get to this place, right? And you have to allow yourself to do it in the time that is right for you, where you can make space for it, where you can take care of yourself, where you understand how to take care of yourself. So it doesn't, it's not about how quickly or how well, or, to be able to post it on Facebook that I did this. Like, I don't talk about my intermittent fasting on Facebook, really, because who fucking cares? Sorry, but right? It's not about that. It's not about me posting it on Facebook. It's about me looking at this and going, oh my God, it's been 288 days of me doing this, which means it's been 288 days of me learning how to take care of myself and my emotions. And that's the power. That's the powerful thing, right? So anyway, yeah, that's what I think about that. I totally agree with you 100%. And I really thank you for creating this space for us to talk about this, because I think this is very important to talk about. And as always, it's your courage and your vulnerability in showing yourself that has allowed us to do that. So thank you, darling. I love you for that. And I love you for many other things as well.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I was listening to Brene Brown in the car today, her Gifts of Imperfection. And, it talks about, like, again, my biggest aha moment in the last couple of weeks was the fact that vulnerable is like, because especially with like big T trauma, but it's small T trauma, because you know what? You can be a kid and you didn't get that doll when you were like 3 years old, and you may not think that it leaves a mark, but it leaves a mark. So it doesn't matter the trauma, it matters the commitment to healing. And so thank you. I love you just for, and again, just, I think that's one of our connections, is that a lot of our experiences are similar but different, because it doesn't matter what you go through. Everybody processes it as in their humanity, and who they become as how we make our decisions. This is all vital. It's like, you wouldn't go and buy a new car or get like a Porsche and not understand how to take care of it. Well, this is our Porsche. You know what I mean? This is our Porsche. So how do we take care of it? And thank you for sharing. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for showing up with your depth. And I'm actually looking forward to this month, because there's just been, for anybody that watches it, a collective trauma summit that just completed last week. And there was some really great speakers there talking about, one of the things that we're going to talk about next week is intergenerational trauma and how that shows up. And as we go along, there's going to be things like Aisha was talking about, meditation. There's something called morning pages, where it's like a mind dump. So you just write, you get one of these, this is actually my morning pages thing, and it's just 8.5 by 11. And I just write 3 pages every morning. And the thing is, especially when you're going through processing, it allows you to just get it out on paper. Once it's out on paper, it's like, okay, what am I going to do with that? Because no edit, no audit, you just write. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling, and even when we talk about that obligation piece, there's many layers to the obligation part, but for the overwhelm, it's important to really connect here. And one of the things that journaling does really well, and not one of these leather bound, because as you see, this is one of those school things. I burn these suckers. Because for me, it's releasing, right? It's all about releasing. So, and that's just me, because on fire, I like burning things. But I'm just saying, it's also for me a big release. Like, so again, and that's part of ritual, right? Like, that's part of ritual. But anyways, I can go off and off. So next week, we're going to talk about intergenerational trauma. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a big chat about feeding our brain. I'm going to leave it at that. feeding our brain. And then the last week is going to be how to support other people. You know, I had an experience this morning where somebody was overwhelmed and she needed to say her piece. And it's like, okay, that's great. And then it got to the point where it's like, I can't support you. So it's like how to set boundaries in appropriate ways. And hopefully we've already given you some ways to think, because really half of this is being aware and taking the time to, and it doesn't have to be more than 5 or 10 minutes a day, like 5 minutes of meditation a day. And again, for anybody that doesn't know what I do, I have actually an introduction to silence in which I do a body scan that's a relaxation, and then there's silence in the middle. Why is that? Guided meditations is somebody else's thoughts in your head telling you what to do. That's great if it works for you. Music's great. But you know, the biggest breakthroughs that I've ever had, like, oh my God, one specifically about my dad was, it was the middle of the winter. It was one of those minus 20 days with snow. It was so cold, hardly anybody was outside. And I was out in the silence of my park. And I just had this big aha moment about my dad doing the best that he could do. And that changed the whole relationship that we had. And if I didn't have the silence in here, I wouldn't have been able to hear it, right? Because, you know, and again, it's no judgment, but there's people that have TVs on in the background all the time. They have TVs in their bedrooms. They have, like, your bedroom should be for, you know, loving your honey and sleeping. So that's just one thing, but different people have different things, but these are all habits, right? So it's like, do we have those moments of silence where we can actually say to yourself, hey man, I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what you're feeling, and taking that time. So I think I'm probably, have we been yammering on for, oh, okay. It's half an hour. We're way past half an hour today. So let us know in the comment section. Send either of us, you know, a DM or a personal message, whatever. And we will be putting out more promotional things about the next few weeks, because this is a big topic. It affects all of us, especially now where we are in this world. And my whole thing is I want to help people love themselves from the ground up, because when you're okay and comfortable in your own skin, you're not so much involved with other people doing whatever they need to do. And we're all at different places, right? So some of us need to be able to hold space for those who are coming behind us or beside us or even above us. We're all human, right? There's no above. Anyways, I just opened another can of worms, didn't I? So any final thoughts, Aisha?
No, I think you kind of covered it. We're all good. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next week when we talk about intergenerational trauma. And through this week, this is recovering from trauma is this month. And we hope that it gives some comfort and some tools to be able to work through the step that we're going through collectively and individually.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. I love you. Okay, guys, we'll see you next week. And we'll see you
next week.
We'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
I will.
Lots of love.
Okay.
Bye.